Hello, everyone. Today I'll be presenting my project titled Patois, the Language of the People, a historical review of language attitudes in Jamaica. I'd like to begin with a Jamaican proverb: New broom sweep clean, but old broom no corner. Translation: Yes, a new broom may sweep clean, but the old broom knows all of the corners. Though the influence of English continues to dominate formal spaces, the true core of Jamaica lives in patois, carrying the resilience, cultural memory, and the everyday reality of the Jamaican people. Here's the outline for today. Let's start with my research focus. Then we'll move through Jamaica's historical background and linguistic landscapes. We'll talk about evolving language attitudes, language and identity, and end with broader implications and conclusions. Research focus. My focus in this project was investigating language attitudes towards Jamaican Creole, not only in contemporary Jamaica, but also from a historical lens. I also wanted to see how colonialism shaped language prestige and stigma. And finally, this research was focused on historical development rather than new survey data. Why study patois? Good question. Personally, I wanted to understand more about the persistent myths of patois and challenge them. Patois is not broken English. It is something all of its own, and we'll go into that later on. I also wanted to establish how language choice is tied to class identity and belonging. And I also wanted to understand postcolonial language struggles and attitudes. Let's start with the historical background. To understand Jamaica's language situation, we first need to begin with its colonial history. Jamaica was colonized by Spain in 1494 and then colonized by the British in 1655. Jamaica was under British rule for 300 years, and in this time, English was imposed as the language of power. Through language contact with the African slaves and the British, creolization happened and a language hierarchy on the island began, with English being the H language and Patois being the L. The development of Patois. Patois began in the settlement phase in the 17th century, where English dialects and African languages had early contact. Then it moved to the plantation phase, in which different different workers restructured the Creole system and created a clear social stratification. Finally, there is the post emancipation phase, in which continued variation happened and the Creole continuum solidified. In my paper, I go further into detail on these three steps and talk about my proposed fourth stage, in which Jamaica is currently undergoing, which is a bilingual phase. After emancipation in 1834 from slavery and independence from the British in 1962, English continued to hold prestige, with language hierarchy linking English with education and social mobility, while patois was associated with informality and lower status. These associations were deeply tied to colonial ideas about race, class, and respectability. Let's take a look at the linguistic landscape of Jamaica. Today, Jamaica's language reflects this layered history. There are two main languages in Jamaica, the first being Jamaican Standard English, or JSE. Jamaican Standard English is Jamaica's official language, which means it's used in formal settings such as school, government, and media. Jamaican Creole, conversely, is the native language. However, it is not official and it is used informally in the home and with friends. The historical development of Patois. So, in the mid 19th century, the majority of Jamaicans spoke varieties from conservative Creole to emerging local English standards. Then marginalization happened, in which African languages and British English dialect became limited to smaller groups. In the mid 20th century, contact between Creole varieties and Jamaican English shaped the language continuum. What does all this mean? The key insight from Winford, 2000, is that the mesolect emerged from stable contact between two distinct languages, Jamaican Creole and English, not from language decay. Hence, Jamaican Creole is not broken English. What is this acrolect? What is this mesolect? What is this basolect? Jamaica exists in a diglossic situation in a Creole continuum, a structured continuum that includes an acrolect that is closest to Standard English, a basolect closest to the Creole, and a mesolect that lies somewhere in between. This Creole is not random, it is structured. For example, in Jamaican Creole, the past tense is not marked the same way. Instead of he walked, we'd say ima walk, im walk. Serial verbs like gosi and comtel are common, and pluralization is shown with them instead of an S. These are systematic grammatical structures, not mistakes that people are making in their speech. Patois is a full language with its own rules and internal consistency, not broken English. Recognizing this is key to understanding Jamaica's ongoing linguistic evolution. In the 19th and 20th century, the inspectors of schools reported that they found no English in the Jamaican schools. What they found, rather, was a degenerate form of English, forms of speech from the home and the street, coarse provisionalisms, broken English. This brings me to our next section, language attitudes in Jamaica. Historically and institutionally, what are the language attitudes towards Jamaican Creole? And how do they differ from the everyday people's attitude? In 1986, The Gleaner, a Jamaican newspaper, published this editorial that it is not patois that is under threat, but the English language. This is a larger system of colonial education system privileging standard English over patois, with patois being viewed as broken English and schools and media discouraging its use. Though in the mid 20th century, early linguists started to challenge these ideas. However, Creoles are still spoken about as baby talk, child language, non natural language that do not serve societal communicative needs or the full cognitive needs of the human species. Alain, 1994, page 8. So, what do contemporary attitudes look like today? We're no longer in 1994. In 2025, surveys still show that there is overt support for standard English, but covertly, people still hold subconscious biases in which they prefer British and American accents because they believe they sound more professional. There are ambivalent views in speakers of Patois as Patois becomes more popular in media in the rise of reggae music and other forms of media. There is a tension between pride and lingering stigma, as well as the difficulties in respectability politics. In 2005, the people of Jamaica spoke, and they said 79.5% that they recognize Patois as a language. 68.5% of Jamaicans support its status as an official language. 71.1% would prefer their children go into bilingual schools, and 78.6% identify as bilingual. This shows that a changing tide of viewing Patois as a legitimate language that deserves official language, not something that is broken and to be hidden. Let's touch a little bit on language and identity. Language choice in Jamaica reflects more than communication. It reflects social identity and solidarity. Jamaican Creole increasingly symbolizes national pride, particularly among the younger generations. However, there continues to exist tension between the authenticity through Creole and social mobility that standard English offers you, especially where in many cases, in many spaces, standard English continues to be linked to professionalism. What are the broader implications of all of this? In the end, we see that Jamaica is slowly transitioning towards being a fully bilingual society. As Farquharson notes, societal bilingualism is on the rise, as well as an effort towards bilingual education. Definition Carpenter, 2007. In my paper, I dive a little deeper on the bilingual education aspect and how it shows this shift towards bilingual education and bilingualism in Jamaica. There are still remaining barriers, such as the lack of official recognition for Patois and institutional biases. Patois is becoming more accepted in media, politics, and popular culture. However, official recognition is still limited. This mirrors larger post colonial struggles over linguistic legitimacy, autonomy, and identity formation. In conclusion, Jamaica's linguistic situation is a reflection of its colonial past. Patois is not broken English, it is the language of the people. Although language attitudes are slowly shifting towards greater acceptance and pride, full recognition remains a work in progress. And finally, language change in Jamaica is not just about communication. It is about cultural reclamation and asserting an independent national identity. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I really appreciate it. Please see my references here.